me, is it the calm before a storm?
Well, actually, I'd refer to it, Rob, as the perfect storm. I mean, there's a lot of things that have fallen into line this year that, you know, we talk about the perfect storm. We have lots of little things that stack up, and they all contribute to getting the perfect storm. And this is a season, and I've alluded to it in previous interviews over the last probably 5 or 6 months that the potential was there. But all of those things are stacked up now, and we've got the 3 or 4 biggies that are lining up for the perfect storm or a pretty serious drought. And that is that we've got very low groundwater levels, more than somewhere around about 80% of all of the bores that Environment Canterbury monitors in their region have water levels that are below the long-term October average. So when they did their last survey at the beginning of November, and they put their report out at the end of October, then that's where we're at. Now we're a month on from that, so things are worse than they were prior when that report was produced. We've got outside of irrigated areas, we've got virtually no soil moisture reserve. I mean, if you go into areas like North Canterbury and look at how much of the soil has been wetted up after the little bits of rainfall we got, we're only wetting up the top 30 or 40 millimetres of the 30 or 40 millimetres of the soil, and below that it's just dust still. So we're surviving on bits and pieces, and people refer to it as a green drought. Well, I think it's worse than a green drought in those areas because we're not actually generating growth, we're just literally keeping things alive. We've had extremely low rainfall. Most of Canterbury has only had this year about 40% of its long-term average rainfall. So we've got all of these things that are stacking up towards a perfect storm, and now everybody has confirmed that we have El Nino conditions. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I follow a weather site in Australia called Weather Zone, and they've been warning Australians since about May and June that El Nino's coming. This is what it's going to mean. Get prepared. And suddenly we've just realised that, or the farmers have not just realised, they've known this has been here for a long time, you know, that we've been going through this since May. It was really interesting in one of the ag reports that I get that the Reserve Bank, November the 3rd, didn't raise the cash flow rate because of a pending or potential drought. And I thought,
they haven't been listening to On the Land, have they?
They haven't been listening to On the Land, and I seriously wonder where some of their advisors are housed, because my goodness, if you come into areas of like Canterbury, for example, or go into the areas of Marlborough, and you go into parts of the wider Rapper, man, we've been looking down the barrel at this for 4 or 5 months, not just in the last month. So you sort of think, well, gee, they've finally woken up that things are really quite serious. And it's sort of a retrospective look at things rather than being a proactive look at things, unfortunately.
It's a bit scary that Central Plains, for example, is on restrictions, and Opua's got a question mark over it.
Yes, it is. Opua to a lesser extent, because Opua is very dependent upon the easterly, southeasterly type storms to actually get the inflow they need into the dam. They've benefited a bit from a relatively good snowfall. You know, in places like Mount Dobson had really good skiing this year, so they've benefited a bit from that. But if you look at where our weather comes from at the moment, you know, we're getting most of our weather's coming in from the west and the southwest. Well, they don't generate rainfall significant enough to actually give us flows in those lowland streams, which is what we need for Opua. So Opua to a lesser extent. But what is surprising is when we have El Nino conditions, which is westerly dominated, northwesterly, westerly, southwesterly dominated, that the rainfalls aren't spilling into the headwaters of things like the Rakaia River, for example, or into the Waimakiriri River. Just the other day I was talking to one of our clients that absolutely worried about the clarity of the water that's coming down the race on the Waimakiriri irrigation scheme. That's a real concern to them. When they can see the bottom of the race, they're going, hang on a minute, this is not a good sign. We need to see some dirty water coming down there because we need it to be coming from the rainfall that's spilled over into the upper catchment. So the fact that particularly a scheme like the Central Plains scheme, and it also affects schemes to the south of the river as well, such as Bahau-Chertsey, that we're running against restrictions in November is pretty scary for an alpine river which should be getting replenished from El Nino type conditions.
Can you explain the water storage access?
Yeah, so if you're a shareholder in one of the schemes that uses Rakaia River water, like Bahau-Chertsey, for example, or the Acton scheme or Central Plains water, then you can buy storage in Lake Coleridge. So you can buy a proportion of the volume of water that you're going to use each year ahead of time. You have to sign up for this water before your irrigation season starts, and you can store that up in Lake Coleridge. There's a limited amount of storage in Lake Coleridge, so it's a first come, first served process. At the moment, because Central Plains in particular, and even Bahau-Chertsey is not fully developed, then there is spare water up there, or spare capacity up there to buy. But you pay for that water whether you use it or not. So at the moment it's around about 8 cents a cubic metre. So if you want to store 100,000 cubic metres, then it's going to cost you $8,000 to store that water. You pay that whether you use it or not. At the moment, because the river's on and off restrictions, because the scheme is using high band water, so unreliable water effectively, the farmers are using up their stored water that they've paid for in Coleridge. So they have to let Trustpower know by about 6 o'clock every day that they want X cubic metres of water delivered tomorrow and what that flow rate will be. So they're busy at the moment depleting what they hoped they wouldn't have to use until probably February or March next year. That's scary.
It's really scary.
It is. I mean, there will be the potential, probably, hoping we get some flows, to actually use a second fill, and you can do that, but you have to use all your first paid for water before you can actually apply to use some of that extra water that might be available at a later date.
And the question mark is might be.
I think the big question mark right now is might, because these rivers, the big rivers, these alpine rivers, are not benefiting at all from the El Nino conditions that we're getting.
And that's because there's not enough rain coming over the top.
Yeah, look, you watch the forecasts, and Fiordland and South Westland's going to get 200 millimetres, and we might get 150 millimetres in the headwaters. Well, when you look at the clarity of the rivers, I don't think I've seen the Rakaia River or the Waimakariri River very dirty for about 6 weeks, and that's a concern, because if it's spilling over, it will be dirty at the
Absolutely.